in like the multi-user dungeons, way before most of your time probably. So Matt and I are here. We're from Evolution, co-founders of Evolution, based in California, a coaching consulting firm working with startups and high growth companies to help them scale without losing their soul. Super happy, honored to be here with you all today and over the next few weeks to support you in your development of yourself, your teams, and your companies, the culture you're creating, and creating evolutionary businesses that are here to enrich the world and all those that you serve. And that's our purpose here, to help steward you through that process and take you on a journey. Matt, I'll turn it over to you to start that journey off.
Great. Yeah. Welcome everyone from Los Angeles. Hello. 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 Oh, you can hear me. Great. Nice. Okay. I'm unmuted. All right. Thanks. We can hear you. We can hear you. All right, everyone. So we're gonna go on a journey over these 4 weeks. And when we started thinking about a journey, we thought of the journey that kind of mirrors all journeys, and what we know is the hero's journey. So we're going to use the hero's journey as part of our narrative over these 4 weeks. And what we'd ask you actually is to think about times in your life that have been the most transformational. And I think about, times of my life that have been the most transformational, where there was a part of me that had an impulse to do something in the world or to be something else and to grow in a certain way. And sometimes that was an internal piece of growth, and sometimes that meant going and moving across the country and starting a new line of work or a new business. And a lot of times what we know for founders and for leaders is the inside and the outside are inextricably linked. So for many of us, when we travel and go on an adventure, there is a part of us that changes with that. And I think of when I left my last job before the one I have now, working with Geoff, I knew there was a part of me that was called to leave my job and to do something else. And the odyssey that it took really was about a year process. I thought I had health issues. I struggled with anxiety. I questioned what I was doing, where I was living. I had just gotten married, and my entire inner world was roiling. And yet, and I remember there's kind of a moment where I kind of sat on my bed with my wife, and we talked a little bit about it, and she's like, "This is your hero's journey." And what ended up happening is something switched over inside of me, and I realized that I was on this narrative that was far bigger than me, that was taking me somewhere, that ended up building what is now a relatively vibrant, beautiful community of coaches that we have at Evolution. Ended up becoming a father, ended up moving, all in a period of a year. And many of us have experiences like that, and many of you started the businesses that you did, and are in this process because of some part of you that's called. And so that we say the founder's journey is the hero's journey. And what we know, the beauty of the hero's journey is that it matches all the great stories across all time. And we think of that, as Joseph Campbell wrote, who is the man that wrote A Year with a Thousand Faces, based off of his doctoral dissertation. And he tracked all the myths across the world throughout time, from Africa to Asia to Europe to the Americas. And what he found was all these great stories that we love speak to people across cultures, because there is a standard superstructure that exists in them that speaks to our inner world. And this is manifesting for you in moments and days, and then across our life, by the way. And what that is that we're, similar to Luke, dissatisfied with our current reality and our status quo, and we hear some call to adventure, some great call to adventure. And if you think of Luke, or you think of all the other movies that use this, because a lot of screenwriters use this story as well, there's a refusal of the call, there's a meeting of a mentor and an ally, and then the leaving of home, right? Going off on the Odyssey, if you are Odysseus and beginning your travels, and then going and being tested relentlessly and finding people that will help you and finding enemies, and then getting to that place where the ordeal happens. And if you think of this moment, it happened a number of times in Star Wars, and George Lucas used the hero's journey, but that's where he pulls the mask off of Darth Vader and finds his own face, right? Because in the ordeal, we come to grips with the deepest parts of ourselves. And when we integrate, it's really not about killing, but integrate that part of ourselves, we then go on a return journey and give back to the world something that is supremely powerful and integrated with our gift. And so our world is better for those of us that undergo this journey consciously and build these businesses consciously. So what we'd ask is that you use this and you think about the hero's journey that you're on, that the link of your individual journey and the business that you're building. And over the next 4 weeks, we'll explore this as an odyssey in different aspects of it. So, Geoff. You're muted, Geoff.
There we go. Sorry, I muted myself and then couldn't unmute. So yeah, I think, as we do that, an important thing is confidentiality. This is a personal thing. Even though we're here in a lot of ways talking about our business, we're also here to really focus on our work in the world. And as we do that, we need to be able to believe that we can have some safety in the work we're doing with others. And so, while this is a big group and we are going to try to do some times of breakout so that there will be opportunities for each of you to share with one another, we ask you to hold confidentiality in any of the specific stories you hear from one another, and keep it as safe a space as we can create for all of us to be able to really learn together, because there's something powerful about being a bit more open, a bit vulnerable, using social sensitivity, being thoughtful about it, but maybe, expanding a little beyond what you might say to somebody else, just, randomly on the train or at a normal workplace. And this is something I think you can also take to your businesses if you haven't already. So I'd like you to ask that. We'd also like you to really be active during all of our sessions. They are completely interactive. They're not lectures with then Q&A. They are interactive the whole time. And so writing wherever you feel like is a good place for you in a journal or elsewhere during the sessions is very important. So please take notes for yourself and notice what's coming up. And there will be a worksheet that I don't know if you've received yet, but if you do, when you have it, that will be something that you can use to also take notes, as well as to respond to some prompts that we're going to be giving you for work between our sessions. And we will certainly follow the group chat, and we'll try to respond or allow for space for some questions during the sessions. We'll do our best on that. That said, it's a pretty full program, and so we can definitely also respond in Slack, in our Slack channel that's listed on the screen under Evolution Leadership, and do that between sessions as well, and urge you to ask each other and support each other, right? This is really a community. Matt and I don't have all the answers. We're here to help steward you, but we're learning with you. And it is a 4-week plan, so this is week 1, and each week we'll have a bit of a different focus. We have some guests coming to join us for some of those sessions, a couple of those weeks, and we're looking forward to having you through that all the way through into the conference, whether you're going to be present or watching it on video. And so with that, those are the kind of agreements we have. If you have others, feel free to share either in the chat or in Slack if you have other things you're looking for. but know we're all here together to learn and grow, and we're all coming at it from different places, different backgrounds, experiences, cultures, and it's an incredible opportunity, right? If you think of your life as an opportunity to grow and evolve, your business you're creating is a great place to do that, as Matt was kind of presenting. So next step, let's move into some of the content here. If maybe a first thing to do is, as we have on the screen here, is a check-in. We really like to check in before all of our meetings, because it's a way to get present, recognize where you are coming in. We ask the question, what is it like to be you in this moment? And it's worth it to consider different aspects of yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, where you're coming from. And typically we would do this out loud and go around the room, so to speak, and share. Again, given the amount of time we have in the large group, we're going to just ask you to think about it, or maybe write down what your check-in might be, and consider that, like what your state is coming into this meeting, this session today.
Yeah. One thing that I would add is this is, we use mindfulness and mindfulness practices, and we'll actually do one later in the session, but really just, it is a holistic way, if you think of these 4 dimensions, and you don't necessarily have to use them, but to like pause the world for a moment and go within and just notice and ground yourself. And I know for me, when I'm revving very fast, especially when you're building a business and moving very quickly, I lose track of that. And then I become far less conscious of the impact that I'm having, what I'm choosing to focus on, what I'm prioritizing, how I'm communicating. It's a great tool to use with a team as well. And everyone on the team goes in and checks in. And then it also builds intimacy with each other, because you're understanding, you're not making up what that look is on their face. You're actually saying, I got it. When your kids was up all night, or you're really anxious about this project that's delayed, or your leg hurts, right? There's lots of those things, and it gives us better data as humans to orchestrate and connect. So really simple, and also really difficult as well. So yeah, we encourage you to just check in throughout the day, and maybe even right now, just check in with yourself.
Yeah. And it can be short. So, I'm really excited to be here, as I said, and feel joyful and curious, a little anxious about the medium in which we're doing this, but mostly happy and very grateful as a check-in. So, just in the interest of time, we're going to keep going here. We use the term evolutionary business as a way to describe what we see as a very broad movement that we're all part of here, that has been happening for a while and has a long way to go and a lot left to discover. And one of the key aspects of it was influenced greatly by integral theory, the work of Ken Wilber in Boulder, if you're familiar with it, and we'll provide some background reading for people who are interested in getting more into a lot of the things we talk about. But we've taken that and turned into a couple of what we think are a little bit more relevant and simpler versions of that theory. And one of those is that every organization has 3 dimensions. And we call those I, we, and it. And others do too. We're not the only ones who use that terminology, by the way. But what it basically says is that while most of the time in business, we focus on what we call here the it dimension, the impersonal aspects of an organization, the products and services we're creating, the strategy, the projects, the initiatives, even things like the structure and building, et cetera. And that's how we spend most of our time at work, is working on those things, dealing with problems, looking for opportunities, executing against plans. And of course, it's super important. And with startups, it's kind of like, well, isn't that the only thing? And our view is, no, it's not. It's just one piece of the whole. And the whole really is this kind of 3-dimensional yin, yang, yang, which has become our logo of parts that are working together. And the it is one of those, and the other 2 are human. The I dimension, which is the intrapersonal, the looking within, the very much the individual experience for each person, you and the others involved, how you are showing up each day, and every day, your emotions, your values, your just how your personality, your background, etc. And nice drawing on the slide. I like that. Not sure how that happened. And and also how others perceive you. And then the we is the interpersonal dimension, meaning relational, how it is between people, whether it's two or the entire team, how you work together, whether you trust one another, solidarity, alignment, coordination, commitments, accountability, et cetera. And you know, these things really all equally make it up. We can look at a problem from any of those dimensions as a starting point, and we'll find aspects of the other dimensions in it. If I show up to work and I'm tired, probably my work product is going to suffer, and maybe people are going to look at me like I might be upset at them when I just have a tired face. If there's a breakdown in a process, we're going to have some interpersonal relational challenges, and sometimes that can really affect me individually. So these three dimensions are core to our work, and then core to the work we're going to do here with you. And we're starting here with the I dimension today. Matt, you want to take it?
Yeah. So the 4 weeks, this week, we're going to be focused on I. Next week, we're going to talk about the we dimension, about co-founder dynamics, team dynamics, interpersonal communication, and coordination. You know, when we work with early stage businesses, we know co-founder dynamics is in some ways the number one thing that makes a business ineffective and sometimes even fail. The third week is going to be about culture, which is both a blend of we and it. At a very early stage, how do you get clear on what your organizational essence is? What does that even mean? How do you build like a culture code? And then how do you build process to reinforce that, including, you know, at an early stage, things like recruiting and hiring to scale, right, with intention and sustainability. And then the last week, we're going to look at more, I would say, meta frames, things like spiral dynamics and things like service to all stakeholders and the role of business in the world, and you being one of those businesses that can be transformational and service oriented, kind of, and then going all the way back to the I. So we're going to go I this week, we next, and then we it, and then really kind of it at a very trans scale about, and then back to the I over our 4 week journey. So that's kind of the x-axis, and then there's also depth to each one of these dimensions. And this is where, this is what we call be do have. And really, if you think of any journey, right, and this matches the hero's journey, you're starting kind of at, you know, one place where you're not fulfilled, you've got a poor relationship, you're feeling ineffective, maybe simply like you have no business or you haven't designed your product yet, right? And you want to get to the other side where you do have a product or you're fulfilled. And a lot of times the first place we go is just into action, right? What do I need to do differently? And, you know, and at the very least, taking accountability for what are the things I'm doing that support me having a bad relationship, being unfulfilled or ineffective, right? Which is really important to take that kind of very transparent and authentic accounting and then do something different. But what we know is, and if those of you that have exercised before, and after January 1st, you look at, if you go to the gym, like on January 20th, nobody's there, right? And part of that is because our actions are guided by a belief system, right? The reason, if you think of Robert Keegan's work in Immunity to Change, change doesn't stick is because there isn't a shift in beliefs. And if you can capture people's hearts and minds, as we say, right, and shift those, then the behavior that happens is far more sticky, right? And we can get into the brain science of that as well. We're not going to, but it really adds a layer of depth into, don't just do something different, inquire deeply, right, into who am I, right? What are my values? What are the mental models that guide my actions? And it exists at the meta. Who is this? What's the soul of this company, right? Both in the light and the shadow. And how is that guiding our behavior? And if we aligned ourselves, right, in greater integrity, we may actually be more fulfilled, have a better relationship, be more effective, have that product. And this journey is kind of like a U, is the hero's journey, right? And so when we look at this, Wilbur and others, and going back into the, existential philosophers of the late 19th century, we have a result which is driven by something that we do, which is driven by our being, right? And there's lots of dimensions of our being, our narrative, our personality, our enneatype, our family birth order, our disposition, how we wake up, our mood, the state that we have, all of these kind of internalized mechanisms. And that's why checking in and mindfulness is really powerful. It's also why it's really important to ask those deep questions about who you are at the heart of your company too. And so this will be part of our journey and something that you can take away as well. And this is actually a great journaling exercise. Any problem that you're facing individually, to just travel down this U and see if you can get onto the other side, including making new commitments that are aligned with, kind of a new belief system. So. Okay, so we are now going to launch into some activities, and I think we're doing relatively okay for time. And I just want to make sure that Geoff, anything that you want to add here, or if you've been tracking any of the questions, is there anything maybe not that you think we need to answer or pivot before we get into some of these exercises?
No, I would just go back to that slide and then go from there, because actually I think it's a good segue into what we're doing here next.
Great. Okay.
And I appreciate the chat, by the way. It's fun to watch and see and again, try to answer your questions.
Yeah.
It's great to get the feedback. So.
And if we don't actually answer them here, we will copy them and then go into our channel and deliberately answer them, promise. And hopefully our channel can be a vibrant discussion. So, okay.
Yeah, so actually go back a slide, Matt. So just really, I think you can, leave it on this. I think, this is a really helpful, powerful model. And while it's the logical brain, my logical brain can look at it and make sense of it, shifting at the B level it can be very challenging, and it can take a lot of time. And as coaches, that's the work that we're doing, is working at this B level primarily. We're certainly supporting new behaviors, new actions, and working with our clients in that way. But the sustainable change comes at that B level, and yet it's very hard to get to. And one of the reasons is because, I guess, in addition to that, what we find is that there's also a lot of things that come up in our daily life that takes us off course. Even if we know what our values are, we're clear about our purpose, we're very, conscious in our, kind of practices, we meditate, we do a lot of work, especially if we're running a startup company, which is very challenging in the midst of other things in our lives. Stuff happens. It happens all the time. Things come up and they trigger us, they hook us, they throw us, and we have real trouble responding in the way that we really think we should, right? And when that happens, it's almost like we're hijacked and we're no longer ourselves, right? And it happens all the time, sometimes in a big way, sometimes in a small way. It can happen to me just on the road when somebody cuts me off in my car and I feel like that person was unsafe and why did they do that? And I'm really angry and I'll yell at them and my wife will say, why are you yelling at them? They can't hear you. And I think, yes, of course, you're right, but I'm still upset and I still want to yell, even though it's illogical, because I'm triggered. And that doesn't fit with my value of having empathy or caring about others or anything else that really is true about who I believe I am. But this still happens, and there's something deeper there that we'll explore later called shadow. But the action of this happening, of me getting hooked or triggered, is important. And we call that, you can go to the next slide now, Matt. We call that being powerless. I'm in a powerless state. I couldn't help this guy cutting me off, right? I didn't choose for it to happen. It just happened. And me getting angry, well, what do you expect? It was dangerous and he's a jerk, right? All these things I might start saying. And it's a very common thing. And it happens all the time where we get into a powerless space when we're hooked or triggered. Good example for this is, having a meeting and somebody comes late. It happens all the time, at least here in the US. And, the typical thing that people will say is, when they walk in the door, they say, sorry, traffic, right? Traffic was bad. Probably works even better in other parts of the world where there's really terrible traffic, or we think ours is bad, but I know from living in Beijing, it was much worse there. And, I think it's great because it allows me to, if I say that, to feel like I have an understood excuse, and everybody can be very, understanding, and then we can kind of move on, right? And I'm absolved of my blame. This was something out of my control. And great, right? But no, not great. It's not good at all because it has an impact on everybody else, including me. And it's not a good thing. And no, I can't control traffic, but I do have some ability to make changes. And I do have some control over myself. Otherwise, I'm just a leaf floating and blowing in the wind, right? No, I am a person with choice. And, if you read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, it's an incredibly powerful description of his experience in Auschwitz during the Nazi concentration camp during World War II, of where everything was taken away from him. He's an Austrian psychiatrist who was put in the prison, separated from his family, lost everything, couldn't decide if he was going to starve or live or anything. And he discovered that he, no matter what, could hold on to his humanity, who he was, who he is. And he also found in studying others there that those who went and tried to help others and not just try to survive themselves, focus on helping others survive, were the ones who had the best rates of survival. And so there's something about, no matter what, even in a situation as terrible as that, we always have some choice. And to, especially with regard to things like business or traffic, even if we don't feel like we have. And so, if you go to the next slide, Matt, instead of coming from a powerless, actually go forward one more. Instead of coming from a powerless state, we can instead come from what we call a powerful state, where we're truly empowered to take ownership, to figure out what's possible, to accept the situation and make choices and understand our parts in things. So for example, if I'm late to the meeting because of traffic, it's actually given traffic, I left too late, right? I'm putting myself in the subject of the sentence versus making the traffic the powerful thing. And it is a very empowering thing. In fact, using I statements where I talk about myself versus you or they or it is really powerful. And it can make a big, big difference for each of us in our lives. And it's scary, right? Because it means I might be at fault too. I made a choice here. I left too late given traffic. And that's why I'm late to this meeting and I'm causing impact and, I'm taking taking responsibility. Scary word for a lot of us, right? So the question is, do I have the ability to respond in any situation? So the good thing about this also is that not only can we, each of us, do this for ourselves, but we can also support others to move from being powerless to powerful. And again, it happens a lot with business and in life. If you go back again now, Matt, to some of those questions we had below. So, in a powerless situation, somebody's acting like, if you think maybe for a second here, think about your own life for a minute. Think about a story, think about something that's happened to you. Something where you really felt wronged. For me in business, I can think about how at one of my startups, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a programmer. I was building a software product that I wanted to create, I had a vision for, and I had a co-founder or a senior engineering lead who their job was to build the software with me. And we shared the vision and the excitement and the passion, but he, when it came time to have the product done, he didn't deliver. And every time I asked him about it, he said it was fine. And it really caused a big mess. The investors got really upset at me. And then, I felt like I was really stuck, that I had nothing I could do. And it was really painful for me. And it caused a big, big problem for me personally, for the company, et cetera. And, I felt like I was completely out of control, right? So if you think about, these kind of questions in your own life, and it could be anything, business or anything else, the airline's losing your luggage or anything that might, kind of come up to you, you can imagine a place where you've been powerless, where somebody did something to you, or somehow something was done and they did it to you, right? That's if you're with somebody who starts telling you a story like that and you ask them these kind of questions and egg them on, and empathize with them, you're going to really help them to stay in that powerless place. And you'll notice, if you are thinking of a story, you might even be feeling angry again about something that happened years ago, because it's such a, it's such a big deal. It really happens. You get angry, you have this like righteous indignation, right? I was right and they're wrong. And it's, it's just not very helpful. The position of the victim, exactly. When we, and victim is a very strong word, and powerless for us can help people understand it without, the fact that there is a lot of violence in the world and other things of which there are people who've been victimized and regularly are victimized. And yet, yes, we can take on our own place of how to be powerful. And so if you want to go to the next set of questions, Matt. If somebody's approaching you, like on your team, with some challenge like this, they're complaining about somebody else, some outside vendor or somebody else on the team, and something happened, you can really help shift them. And maybe they need a vent first and make sure they feel understood. And I really like to help people feel like they're heard by active listening as a way to start moving them out of a powerless place. But then ask them these kind of questions like, well, if they've already told you what happened, you don't have to ask the first one about what was your experience. You can instead start asking about their choice or choices that they made in this, and what they could have done differently, what you could have done differently. And then also, what can they own about the situation and their part in it? And then especially, what can you learn from this, right? And now what do you want to do? What's your next step? And from these places, it's just like a completely different energy. It's like whoosh, grounded and truly powerful in the most grounded version of that word. So, this is something for each of us to do for ourselves and to support others to do, to come from a place where we truly are in our full power, and we recognize the full degree of choices we always have, always. And it's really a maturing process to do this. And it's a way to help us from being stuck in a hooked or triggered space where we're out of alignment with our values and our purpose, with who the best versions of ourselves. And it's really useful because it happens to all of us. We all go through these things. It can happen in any way, shape, or form. And so starting to recognize the ways to get out of it is a very useful strategy for all of us. So Matt, you want to add anything here to this?
Yeah, I think this fundamental dyad, it doesn't excuse the fact that, as we say, gravity exists, right? People are doing things that are out of your control. A lot of times the binary people around us are like, well, yeah, but that person didn't do that thing and they were supposed to do that thing. And it's like, exactly. But I always know that when I unpack it, I'm like, wow, man, I could have said something 2 weeks ago and I didn't. I could have been more direct with that person. I could have asked a lot clearer questions. I didn't do my part either because I was avoiding it, right? It's like, if I start to do that inquiry, I realize that like I'm part of shaping a lot of my reality. A lot of times I don't want to, it's uncomfortable for me, or I want to kind of ignore it. But accepting unconditional responsibility, my ability to respond, my response ability, is a critical factor for personal effectiveness. And it's the first step in that U of saying, great, I'm unfulfilled, or I don't have my product designed, or I have a bad relationship. What choices did I make? What can I learn from this about me or the situation? What do I want to do based on that? And that puts me controlling the things that I can and having that kind of sovereignty, right? Just like Viktor Frankl did in the prison camps in World War II, where our inner reality can never be taken away from us. That sovereignty can never be taken away from us. And that is the place of power. And it literally kept people alive back then. And then in the Blue Zone research, people that live long lives, and in the research about the most healthy and powerful cultures and organizations, the code base, the absolute base and foundation is that unconditional choicefulness that we all have inside of us. And our belief is that it actually leads to, powerful lives. And what I know for me is that when I go to that place, I think about there's times where my schedule is overly full, right? And a couple of years ago, there was a moment where I just blew up at our scheduler, right? And, I managed myself pretty well. And I think about that, right? And I think about, what had happened. And there was this like building where I was starting to feel victimized by all my appointments and I couldn't get anything done. And this person's really thoughtless. They're not considering me. They're just thinking about themselves. Like I go to all of those powerless questions. And then what happens when I'm in a place of powerlessness is I spin into a reactive behavior, right? And this is where the work of emotional intelligence, and those of you read Dan Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, it's classic. And the work of Myron Salovey that came before, and the whole body of work around emotional intelligence is, the I dimension of personal effectiveness really is getting to know, as Johnny Cash would say, the beast inside of all of us. And knowing like, when I'm powerless, where do I go, right? Because what happens is we realize is there's a hijacking that happens. There's an amygdala hijacking where we go into our kind of, from an evolution standpoint, not evolution our business, but evolutionary, millions of years ago, fight or flight, gearing up to run away from the saber-toothed tiger or fight it. And it articulates in a lot of subtle ways, and you can see this in meetings. You can think about this in your personal life. I experience bad customer service and I blow up, right? I'm in a meeting and I'm getting feedback on a presentation and I notice myself shutting down, right? And so we all have our favorite flavoring of what this is for us. And sometimes it's very demonstrative, like I'm going to come at you and intimidate you. Sometimes it's like using sarcasm or humor as a sideways. We kind of know when that's somebody being reactive. Sometimes it's people going inside, withdrawing, or using intellectualization data. That person that's resisting you because they're trying to use data to resist you. And these are all self-protective behaviors that usually we learn very young, and they had use, right? If we grew up in a sarcastic family, we used sarcasm to combat it, or ran away, or blew up, right? And the funny thing about the age is that we don't grow more wise just because we age. We grow more wise because we consciously look at our internal operating system and update it. So one of the things that we want to do is give you a chance to look at what your reactive behaviors are and your reactive patterns. And so I don't know if we're able, Paula, I actually don't see the button here. So Geoff, we may not be able to do the breakouts, but we were going to let people break out and put you in small groups and get to know each other a little bit and process this. But I'm thinking, based on the fact that I don't normally have the button on this Zoom, and I'm not sure if Paula is even on here, that we're going to be able to do that. So we're probably going to need to continue to jam.
Yeah, and do it yourself, I think.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Paula.
Okay, I think I can make you a host so you can manage it yourself.
Yes, please. That would be great.
Okay. Yeah, let me do it.
Great. So we're going to have a little experiment here and make this a little experiential. And in the spirit of building community, you're going to be put in a breakout group and you're going to have a chance to talk about, getting to know that part of yourself that shows up in leadership, that is reactive and is, when you come from that powerless place. And I still don't have the breakout function.
May not be in this one.
So you're going to be thinking about that yourselves. Okay. And if you continue on with us, we may do more of those breakouts in the future. Apologies. But if you take a look at this list, maybe what you can do is write down a few that have shown up for you in the last month and the situations where they've shown up and then the impact of them. And a lot of times the impact is where I get sober and I'm like, wow, is that who I really want to be? Right. And then, from that place, we can kind of think about, man, who do I really want to be? And what's another way to orient towards a situation or another way to ground myself given gravity is exerting its forces, and I've got investors and I've got team and I've got my personal life, all of which are conspiring to make me constrict, right? Into this place of like, okay, conscious choice, not just amoeba, right? Stimulus and response, but what is my choice and what may I base my choice off of? So one place that we can go is understanding what guides you, right? Your core values. And these things that you might write down, and as we know, some people actually memorialize these and think about this. They're just like any kind of set of operating principles. You internally can have one for yourself as well. So Geoff, I'll pause and let you give a little here, and then I can kind of close the activity.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I think for the reactive behaviors, it really is useful for you to know your own, and it's really powerful to share those with somebody else, those powerless behaviors. And so, you know, that's what the breakout would have been for, but you don't have to wait for that. You can do it other ways. And, you know, people are saying, let's do it in Slack. You could do it here. I think you can also do it live with somebody else in your life. And, you know, if you want to do it with somebody in this program, fine. If you want to do it with somebody who's not in it, that's all good too. But there's something powerful about acknowledging that and sharing it. And so that's kind of what we want to urge. And as Matt said, you know, knowing your values is the other really important, useful mechanism for you to stay more true to who you aspire to be, what I call the best version of yourself. And the way to get there is to you know, we really like to help people find those, not by hearing other people's or reading things, but instead by really kind of going within. And so, you know, there's really a couple different ways to get in there. A really good strategy that I've found helpful to me is to think about people in my life or that I am aware of, that I admire. So these could be people that I personally know, like a family member or a friend, or somebody that from history, or who's done something, whether they're an author or a creator. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mandela is you know, I find him to be a very admirable character. You know, my grandfather, and then why, right? What qualities in these people do I admire? And that's really the key piece. Like, what is it? Like, it's this incredible perseverance, this incredible love for all people that Mandela showed, my grandfather's kindness, no matter what, and his own resilience, etc. And so what you need to do is, you know, take your time here. And, you know, again, we're going quickly, so you might want to do this some after, is to take your, and of course, women can be role models too. I just named my personal ones, and I do have, my mother is a big role model for me as well. And, you know, and it's for you personally, right? And that's the key thing, to take those people and think about the qualities in them that really make them people that you admire, as well as to do some more personal exploration about your life. And Matt, you want to take this a little bit and add to this?
Yeah, and in those kind of moments where you felt really clear or guided or grounded, and looking and saying, like, what were the principles that I was coming from? And if you were like observing yourself in those moments in a difficult situation where you were kind of like still focused on true north, like what essential qualities of you were guiding you, right? And it may be your perseverance, and it may be your essential kindness, it may be your focus, it may be your creativity, and those kind of things. And the reason this is fundamentally useful, and if you read most leadership books, the reason it's, you know, we talk about it and it becomes something that people put over their monitor, is it's a really important reminder when life and gravity exists and we're thrown and given opportunities to go to powerless and given opportunities to go to reactivity. What, you know, we can write these things down, right? And so one of your pieces of homework is to actually write down your core values. And Ray is going to be giving you, as Geoff said, a form that this is going to be one of the things that we're going to have you do, because it's really important for a leader. And we've seen a lot of companies, including Slack, including Snapchat. I mean, these are the companies we worked in. get to scale and have watched leaders go from 1, 2 people to thousands. And it becomes like immeasurably important the larger you get, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, it's kind of trite at the beginning. It's like, okay, I'll do this activity. But, you know, when you've got competing demands and even more pressure and even more complexity, the simple code that you have inside of yourself is one of the things that can guide you. So we're going to ask you to do this exercise. We're going to go through a few brief other things. This Jung quote is, you know, we talk a lot about the shadow. You know, there is no coming to consciousness without pain, right? We avoid it at all costs, but we do not become enlightened by just looking at our light. We become enlightened by integrating our darkness and understanding that there is a beast in all of us and we are reactive. And not only do we have reactive behaviors, but there's belief systems, you know, that exist that are the shame that I have and the anxiety, the fear, the feelings of unworthiness. And sitting in some of the best known tech companies with their leadership teams and hearing them talk about their imposter syndrome and how they feel like they don't deserve the success that they have. And the human factor in our great depths is always there. And so we believe, you know, and especially if you look at your reactive behaviors, right, the next place down is to your shadow, right? Once you clarify your values, you have to clarify, you know, with every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, your shadow values or your shadow beliefs. And we're going to have you clarify those as well, right? We want to know, and we want to get to know, and we want you to get to know that part of yourself that you hide, repress, and deny, that feels unacceptable to talk about. And what we know is that if you don't manage the shadow, it will come out and it will puppet you. And the shadow in some ways is responsible for destruction, the, you know, kind of macro destruction that we see in the world that is unconscious, and businesses failing and leaders failing. Geoff, anything that you'd like to add about the shadow?
No, I mean, that's it. It's a often deep and you know, deeply held and not really something, you know, at least I know I want to admit easily, right? And it's hard often to admit those parts of ourselves that we really don't like, and it's hard to even recognize them, I'd say, a lot of times, right? And it takes a lot of compassion for self, I would say, and courage and willingness, like even at another level, to be open about those parts of ourselves. You know, quick example, me being perennially late to meetings, and you know, I'd say that's those stories, you know, that often have. And when I really look into it, I can have a shadow around believing I can control things like traffic or other things in the universe that I really can't, and therefore can leave with not enough time to make it. But I can go even deeper and go, there's a shadow about whether or not I really deeply care about people the way I say I do. Because there's some part of me that doesn't, if I'm willing to show up late to a meeting, because it has a negative impact on people. And, you know, coming to terms with something like that was very difficult for me to admit, because I truly care a lot about people in a, I believe, mostly healthy way, sometimes even a people-pleasing way. And so like that kind of discovery has been very empowering for me to be able to admit to myself and to others, like I am to all of you right now, as a way to not let it run the show for me.
Yep, it's really important. And then make a more conscious choice, including to come from the place of values and truly who we are, and acknowledging that, right, as a leader and as a human. And then, you know, the last thing that we'll leave with you, and then this is going to be, and then we'll do kind of maybe a little Q&A, and if we can, and a very short mindfulness exercise, really is, you know, what your vision is for your life. And this can be many things, including all aspects: family, personal, recreation, financial, business. And we're going to ask you to think holistically, because we know for founders, it's not just about your business, and a founder's personal mental health is just as important, in fact, very important at the early stage. But we really want you to craft what your vision is, where you see yourself, what you're creating, the life that you're going to live, and the life that you dream to live. And from the hero's journey, really what your call to adventure is. And the right brain loves imagery. So to the degree you draw it or come up with, you know, metaphors that you can use and imagining 5 years from now, the impact, every time I've gone through that exercise, I've been humbled by the fact that much of it comes true. And actually, I wish I would have, you know, looked even further up in the horizon. So we're going to be asking you to come up with what your vision is. And that's another North Star along with our values that says, like, who am I? Where am I going? And with whom? Those are the three fundamental and existential questions of life. And that's, yeah.
Sorry, Matt.
Go ahead, Geoff.
Say the great thing about vision is we showed you early on, be, do, have, right? Those three levels. And on an individual, on all three of the dimensions, you know, here we're talking about it individually, you know, the vision is your future have that you want to create, right? And of course, we can't control outcomes. We can't control everything, as we've just been talking about, but we can influence it a lot by having a really clear vision. And that kind of future have has a lot of power to aim us for. But of course, if without the grounding of the deep B level constructs we're talking about here with values, personal mission or purpose, understanding our beliefs, our mindset, knowing our shadow parts, it's going to be hard to get there, right? And from those two places, we can make good choices about actions and behaviors and other things that we're doing day to day that really make us who we are in a lot of ways and have people experience us. So,
yep. Wonderful. Okay, so let's maybe, what we can do here is I do want to end with a mindfulness example. We're big fans of meditation, and maybe what we can do, Geoff, is just you know, answer a few questions, and you know, there's a lot of thoughts here on the right side, but maybe right now what you can do for those of you that are still on is type a question or two that you'd like us to respond to in you know, the last kind of 5 minutes or so, if you have one. And you know, we can just turn it into a little bit of Q&A before we close. Resource or book to recommend to investigate shadows. Meeting the Shadow by Connie Zweig is one. She's based in LA. There's a book that has Wilbur and many others. They each wrote a chapter on shadow. We have a book list that we will share as well.
Matt's written a really good article on shadow as well, by the way.
Yep.
On Medium, I think.
How do we perceive and define greatness, taking into account that greatness can lead to negative and positive?
That is a tough question to answer quickly.
It is. Even the frame of greatness, I think, is a bit of a setup, actually. Right? It's like every time I've done that, it's like part of my expanded ego, and you know.
I would say wholeness. Wholeness is a better term, maybe, right? Fully integrated and whole, and fully present and of self-awareness. That's what we're talking about here, really. Because from that place, anything's possible, but there's a paradox because it has to be fully grounded for it to be, in my opinion, especially over long term, right? And so
the embodiment, we recommend body work, somatic experiencing, deep yoga practices, Hakomi, voice dialogue. All of those kind of things are absolutely critical to work through the trauma that our body has. And we believe that people go to work and work out their family of origin issues, and you know, your epigenetics, right? Your wounding that has been passed down through the generations is still active at work. And in fact, it's the primary place. So to the degree you can work in with the body, because that's where a lot of our energy and anxiety is stored, and having practices, that's really important, right? So it's not just cognition and thought. EMDR is great. Yep.
Yeah, I think this community, my sense is all of you have as many of, you know, you have many ideas, examples, and that's what's so amazing about it. Why we wanted to, you know, support Nicole and Ray and the whole, you know, TTA, because we think you'll bring a lot to it. So I think, you know, answering each other's questions, well, I think what we can do is take some of these from the chat and put them into Slack, and then put, either our answers or you can add your own answers to these, and the community can help learn together.
Right.
And, there's no one right answer in my experience. So.
Identifying your emotions is a way into your deeper truth and your shadow. And there was a question of like, how do I do this with my team and encourage that kind of openness? And our response to that really is, you are the culture, right? As the leader, as the founder, like people will follow what you role model, especially at this stage, and then across hundreds of people. So, be that, right? Be the change.
I think it's time to wrap up now.
Yes. So what we're going to do right now, and there's many experts, but just as a way to kind of like peacefully and gently say goodbye, is go into a practice of mindfulness. So to the degree that you're able to disconnect, and shut your eyes, or maybe let them gently rest somewhere else other than your screen, we'd encourage you to take on a posture of nobility. So if you think of the regent as never either, slouched, but at the same time is not rigid, a sovereign, we're in our place of nobleness, which is both relaxed, but also focused. Letting your spine extend from your pelvis as an invisible string up through the top of your head. Feet on the ground if you're able, and just take a couple of deep, easy breaths, enjoying the quality of oxygen moving in and out of your body. I like to shut my mouth and rest my tongue against the upper roof of my mouth. Nose. And enjoying the quality of my breath. Just take a moment to sink into myself and my awareness of my body. As thoughts come in, noticing them like clouds passing in front of the sun, noticing them and letting them go, returning to breath. Breathing again and letting our consciousness move from our head all the way down through our body. Feeling this vessel that carries us as leaders through our difficulties and our trials towards where we're going in this lifetime. Take a breath. One last large, easy breath and back into the room. Thank you. We look forward to chatting with you in Slack. We look forward to the journey of the weeks ahead. We look forward to answering some of these questions and sharing articles and learning from you as well.
Thank you, everyone. See you in Slack. See you next week.